Hello everyone. Today we're talking about the JQ discussion number 3 that I'm going to be covering between Frame Game Radio and someone by the name of David. He's not a YouTuber or content creator of any kind, so he doesn't really have any presence. And at one point you had Babylonian Hebrew jump in and add in some questions. First off, I'd like to say that Frame Game and Babylonian Hebrew both did pretty well. I think that their strategy was a bit off, and I'll explain why. But really, that is the most important thing to realize when you go into these types of debates, as I've realized over watching a whole bunch of these different live streams. There is a specific strategy that you have to nail down in order to get your point across. Because as we see with this David person, he does the exact same tactics with a little bit of a twist as the other people who are in opposition to the JQ who have come on these live streams, call it blood sports, whatever you want, but the exact same tactics are used. So, David is particularly bad because he is consistently interrupting everyone who is speaking and attempting to essentially have a shouting match with them over specific details of what they're saying. Instead of letting the person have their 2-3 minutes to say something, he will interject as soon as he finds something to challenge them on, which is incredibly annoying because this is such a nuanced topic that you have to give like 2 or 3 minute responses to everything. So now, of course, the other participants gave him plenty of time to speak, which I think is a mistake. So what else does he do? Well, he obfuscates. He completely glosses over the argumentation that Frame Game in particular was trying to make. He pivots particularly hard on issues that he can't honestly answer to. And this is probably the worst thing that he does, is that he just wastes my time. This is a complete waste of time. In fact, this is one of the few streams where I'm not going to recommend you go back and watch it because you're not going to learn anything. It's not even entertaining. It's just irritating listening to this person talk, because what he does, in order to filibuster or stall for time, he goes on a ramble, just a big old word salad with plenty of ranch dressing on the top. So when he goes into a subject, like when he was first talking about his job as a mathematician, he went on like a 2 or 3 minute diatribe on how he isn't an expert and that what he actually does in work involves this, that, or the other. Like, man, we're not here to listen about mathematics. Either answer the fucking question or don't. And this becomes apparent that when he tries to respond to something, what he does is he just tries to waste as much time as possible so that whoever he's arguing against will forget what his position was, and then at the end of his diatribe, he will finally make his point in order to pivot the discussion towards his point instead of actually answering the question that he was supposed to be responding to. Another slimy tactic that I might not have pointed out before is that when you share an argument with this person, what you have to do is nail down what your argumentation is first, because what David does is that he picks out a part of your argument that he can take offense to, or not offense, but he can take issue with, and then he'll use that to shift the conversation towards exactly what he wants to talk about, which obfuscates exactly what the argumentation was. For example, Frame Game tries to bring up the point that there is a very powerful female rabbi in the United States that is influencing politics. She has a direct line to, or did have a direct line to, Barack Obama, swore him in second term. But look at what David's response actually is to that. And I think he actually interrupts Frame Game before he can even get the point out. He immediately jumps on Frame for using a female rabbi, because obviously, being raised Orthodox, David doesn't believe that females can become rabbis. So what he does is he pivots the discussion to the topic of the legitimacy of female rabbis, instead of letting Frame finish his point and then have to respond to this idea that there are influential Jewish people at the highest levels of the government. He changes it to a discussion about the so-called legitimacy of female rabbis, and also changes the discussion the difference between Orthodox and Reform Jews and how one is somehow more legitimate than the other when it comes to power structures. So this is what he does time and time again throughout the debate. He'll nitpick or take one part of the argument, ignore the important bit, and then argue on that, go off on some diatribe for 3 or 5 minutes and just completely derail the discussion. This is why it takes 15 to 20 minutes to get anywhere with this guy. I don't know if it's intentional, if it's a strategy of his, or if he's just that dense, but it really is irritating when you cannot even get a simple premise out there in full without him challenging you on one little part of it. So what should you do in this type of debate? First, you have to be on the offensive immediately from the get-go and put your opposition in a box as soon as possible. Clearly define your questions. Write them out beforehand. Have a list of 10 very simple, linear questions that will really get down to the heart of the matter. And don't let up. Let the moderators do their job, and don't let your opposition sort of jump in and try and derail the conversation. And if you see them attempting to derail the conversation, call them out on it and keep them from doing it. Get back on track. Go through your 10 questions. As much as Frame and Babylonian Hebrew got David to backpedal on a lot of issues, it took them far too long and the conversation was way too derailed. They got away from the actual issue, which is in-group preferences amongst certain groups in the world. For example, first question you could ask, do you acknowledge the presence of Jewish influence or Israeli lobby groups in the United States? Obviously, he has to say yes. Okay, he said yes. Next question, do you acknowledge that these same groups have an inordinate amount of political power in the United States? Now, if he says no, you can shift to the fact that in the United States, whenever you try and take public office, you are immediately analyzed and put before the court of public opinion by these Jewish influence and Israeli lobby groups. Even if you want to become the mayor of any major city or even sub-major city, we're talking 250,000 to 1 million people, you have to get the blessing of these Jewish lobby groups. Otherwise, they will use their smear tactics against you. And this is very clearly documented. I mean, this is not something that you can say no to. It's not an opinion. It's a truth. Whenever you try and run just to get into Congress or even the Senate, you have to deal with these groups making attempts to either persuade you or lobby you, and if you don't work with them, they will smear you. If you don't want to play ball with these groups, they will keep you from gaining that public office by any means necessary, and they will use their friends in the media to do it. Just look at what happened to Paul Nehlen when he tried to run for public office. He wasn't going to play ball with these lobbyist groups, and he got shut down really quick, and he was a pretty milquetoast in some of his opinions, and yet there was this huge smear campaign against him. So when you're dealing with this topic, you have to have a concrete introduction and thesis and put your opponents on the defensive very early on in order to secure the higher ground in this discussion. You can clearly see throughout these debates, this is not what the proponents of the JQ are doing. Instead, they're allowing their opposition to gain the upper hand. As expected, David has the tism when it comes to statistics, and he tries to break down and overanalyze some of the more philosophical points that Frame Game is bringing up to him. He's not a man of abstract thought, as far as I can tell. So another key strategy is that you have to have the numbers and the evidence to back up your claims. Not saying that they don't exist, but you have to have them ready, like written down or up on your second monitor when you go into this debate, because they're going to ask for it, because that's the only defense they have. It's like, well, do you have the study? Do you have the science? And it's really fucking annoying, but this is what they do, and people aren't prepared for it. All in all, I like Frame Game Radio. I like his content. I think it speaks volumes to his character, but I don't think he realized just the magnitude of the trickery that was going to be used against him in this debate. That wraps things up for now. Thanks for watching.